So I need to build a new digital audio workstation for my studio. I do mostly mastering on it, occasional in the box mixes just a couple of times a month. More intensive stuff I do with hardware, so it's not that big of a deal. And I do some video work as well, mostly like YouTube videos with a little bit of green screen compositing, the occasional multicam concert shoot, maybe a commercial once in a while. But yeah, nothing too severe. I mean, I'm not doing 3D graphics or anything like that. Oh yeah, so you're probably going to want at least i7, probably an i9 for that, and yeah, I mean, you need at least 16 gigabytes just to start the computer. I don't think an operating system will run on anything less than 16. Better to have 32 or even 64 for that kind of work. Oh yeah, and you're probably going to need a 1080 Ti at the very least. Oh yeah, and don't forget you'll need at least 2 terabytes SSD as your primary drive. You'll probably want a couple of others just as work drives on top of that. So all in all, you're looking at about $2,000, maybe $3,000. Right. See, most of my clients are working on really tight budgets, so I can't really afford maybe even 2 1080 Ti's. You know, I can do maybe $500 because I need something fairly soon, because my current system is 14 years old. That's not a joke, and it's been working for me for the most part, even for multi-camera concert shoots. But when it comes to rendering high-definition video and stuff like that, it's kind of a problem. Plus, I can't do NTFS or larger file size formats. So yeah, it's gotten to the point where, number one, I'm worried about reliability. I'm really starting to hate working on this computer. So yeah. Oh, and by the way, I think I want to run Linux on this one because Microsoft is starting to suck worse and worse. Now, if you look at my portable recording rig, which is how I make most of my money these days, it's basically an Odroid XU4Q running Linux and now sporting an 8-inch 1024 by 768 screen. A huge advantage over the original 7-inch screen, might I add. I now have the added advantage of being able to just pop the thumb drive out of this, stick it into my studio computer, and get straight to work. But Linux also has the added advantage of being highly configurable, and it doesn't spy on you or restrict your freedom like Microsoft and Mac does, and it comes with its own quirks, of course, but I won't get into that here. I still have a leftover keyboard that's looking a little grungy and a mouse that I never use. They cleaned up quite nicely. I didn't have to go too 8-bit guy on them, no retro writing or anything like that. I just took them apart, cleaned them, and stuck them back together. I also have this Acer 19-inch screen that I used to use on my office computer, and it still works quite well. Now, getting down to a bill of materials, I have an open box micro ATX case. I got a GT 1030, which is not great GPU, but it's certainly better than what was in my original DAW, and it's a little bit better than what I have in my office computer. Now you notice I'm only buying 4 gigabytes of RAM. It's because I have a leftover 4 gigabyte stick from a different computer build. I'm using an AMD processor specifically because it doesn't have as many security exploits as Intel CPUs. And I realize that there's a workaround for that, but it also diminishes performance, and I would just rather use a more secure processor. And if you're wondering about a hard drive, I have 2 240 gigabyte SSDs that I use for video capture, and I decided to sacrifice one of them. It was only a few days later that my tower arrived, so everything went together quite nicely. Unfortunately, the front USB 3 port connector that goes inside the case is missing a part, and the pins are kind of bent, but that was part of the condition of being able to get the case for quite cheap. And of course, my cat decided to take residence in my box, but moving straight along, looks like my CPU finally arrived. I actually wound up getting the CPU slightly cheaper through Amazon, but everything else for the most part was cheaper through Newegg. It's a little cramped dealing with this micro ATX case. I kind of wish I had not thrown away my older ATX case, but it is what it is. As you can see, everything powered up quite nicely. Unfortunately, the memory that I bought flat out defective straight out of the box, so I'm only running 4 gigabytes here just on that spare stick that I had. And so ultimately what I wound up doing is just buying a pair of new memory sticks that are the same brand as the one that I did affirm as working properly. And once I got those in place, everything boots up nicely, and now we can get to the fun stuff. So my first experiment is not a very scientific one. I set up all 3 of my desktop computers side by side, starting with the office computer on the right, the old DAW in the middle, and the new DAW on the left. Now I'm going to just see how long it takes to go from hitting the power button to having a fully loaded DAW, and just see how long it takes. Now while I'm here, I'm also going to do a noise measurement to see how they compare to one another. And yes, I'm using an app on my phone, which is not precise, but it should at least give us a relative idea of how they compare to one another. So we have 32 seconds for the office computer, about 2:36 for the old DAW, and about 45 seconds for the new DAW. And part of the reason that took longer with the new DAW is because, number one, I have it set up for dual boot, so I have to make a selection, and I also manually have to start and connect to the audio drivers. But I believe this can be faster with a little tweaking in the future. So the next test is a little more scientific. I'm taking a mini DV clip that I shot way back in 2001, and I'm going to blow them up to high definition. Let's say we have a documentary that we're making and we need to dip into some archival footage. So this is a typical kind of render that we would need to do. I'm using a bicubic resize on all of them, so it's apples to apples. It's purely about the speed of the systems. So it took the office computer about 7 minutes to render, the new DAW about 8 minutes to render, and a whopping 53 minutes for the old DAW. Now the way I used to handle video on my old system, I did do multi-camera video shoots, but what I would do is I set up proxies to do my offline edit, and then I would swap out the files with the originals to do the final render, and I would just let it run for a good solid day or so, just walk away, and it wasn't that much of a hindrance, but being able to turn around material much faster is a huge advantage. I knew that I would be taking a hit with performance. Ultimately, this computer wound up costing me about $450, whereas my office computer cost close to $1,000 when it's all said and done. So anyway, this was a fun little project, and I hope you learned something from it. And by the way, I edited a portion of this video in KDN Live. I'm used to Vegas, where I can do just about everything just in one program and not have to use 10 other programs to get stuff done, like with Premiere and Avid and all those other main guys. It's definitely capable of doing good stuff. It's more capable, in my opinion, and less clunky than Premiere, but I think I might try to set up Vegas with Wine on the new system and see if I can get my videos done in a little more comfortable of an environment. Anyway, I hope you learned something, and see you next time.